Welcome to Town Talk. My name is Karina. Today's guest is Jacque Larrainzar from the Department of Race Equity. Welcome, Jacque.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'd like to start off with you talking about yourself. What brings you to the city of Oakland, and why do you like working here?
Well, I came to Oakland for the first time in the 90s, and I loved it. Yeah. And I always wanted to live here, but the stars never aligned until 5 years ago, when the city of Oakland decided to create the Department of Race and Equity. I saw the job description and I applied. And it all aligned, and here I am doing what I love and in a city that I always wanted to live in. So,
tell me a little bit more about how the city of Oakland founded the Department of Race Equity.
What a lot of people don't know is that there's a lot of history behind that. I would say that people started organizing to create the department back in the 40s. And when they started pushing against all the discrimination and racism that was happening because of the New Hope deal and the freeways and building BART and the post office in West Oakland, some of the stuff that was happening in West Oakland with the Sundown towns and all of that, people in Oakland, I think, were at the forefront in the country pushing against racism ever since then. And you go back to when the Pilgrims showed up, then indigenous people were also organizing already here, right? And 60s with the Black Panthers, the Latino Brown Berets movement, the farm workers movement. I mean, there's so much history in Oakland against organizing against racism. So I think when Desley Brooks had the idea to create a department, that resonated with the people of Oakland. And I always tell to people that the reason why we're here is because the city listened to the people of Oakland, to their desires and their dreams and expectations for government to do better, to be more fair, to be more just. And that's how we got created.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So when you practice race equity work within the city of Oakland, what do you do exactly?
We're a little bit different from other places that do equity because the director, Darlene Flynn, and I actually been doing equity work for more than 20 years. We started in Seattle, where the whole work started back in the early 2000s. So it's been 24 years now. And we learned a lot from doing work in that context, in a city government. And so the focus has always been really to change the systems so we can serve people better as a government. And a lot of the foundation of that is to be a good government. And what that means is that a good government is a government that puts the needs and the well-being of the people that it's serving first. And so equity is really founded on that principle, that every resource that we have, every service that we offer, really needs to reach those that are most vulnerable, those that really need that help. And so through the process that we created in the city, we have some tools, but also a way of managing change that centers equity as a value. We've been able in the last 5 years to embed that way of thinking and that way of taking action into a lot of processes and planning and policy processes that the city have citywide. And that's our mandate. A lot of people also don't know that that's actually part of our municipal code. So in Oakland, doing equity work is part of the municipal code, the law that guides the city. Yeah. And so that's our foundational work, basically, the direction. And so what we do is we work through the departments and we meet with folks that actually implement policies, practices, procedures to bring in the tools that allow folks to center equity. We have a toolkit that asks a set of questions that basically help people to think about Are we being inclusive? Are we bringing the issues, the needs of those who usually have been excluded into these conversations? Are we putting resources in areas that had been divested because of structural racism and all these things that I mentioned before? Are we thinking about the future and trying to set up systems and policies that will allow us to be a different way of government and not repeat the mistakes and the practices that led to having racism embedded in our institutions? So that's what we do.
That's huge,
Yes.
and a big responsibility to have for a city that serves so many people and employs so many people. How many people are on your team?
We're a tiny team. Until very recently, it was only me and the director, so 2. Then we brought Ayana Allen, who's the director's executive assistant, and she really helped us with the operations, manages a lot of day-to-day things. And last year, we were another analyst like me, Amy Ferguson Jacque. And so she's learning to do what I do with the departments. So each one of us works with about 10, 11 different departments. And we support staff and directors to implement equity in their lines of businesses.
Amazing. Your team must be an amazing team. We're going to come right back to the work that you've been doing with departments. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Town Talk in just a little bit. Welcome back. This is Town Talk, and today our guest is Jacque Larrainzar from the Department of Race Equity. So Jacque, you were just telling me about how you work with departments, and I wanted you to go just a little bit deeper and tell us, what does the work with the departments look like? What are some successes that you've had?
Well, we had, I would say, a lot of success, but because we work internally, we're kind of behind the scenes. And we like it that way because really a lot of the work, it's in the departments. And so we really like the credit to go where it's due to the staff that works in those departments, because they really go out of their way to make it happen. When we first got here, there were a lot of conversations about the downtown plan. And a lot of people know that planning and building is one of the areas of government where structural racism is really cooked into it. Through zoning, a lot of decisions were made way back when that created redlining. And so you can actually see the leftovers of that in the geography of Oakland, right? You can see the segregation, you can see the divestment in West Oakland and the Fruitvale on to the east. So we did kind of first, we wanted to find out how those disparities look like. So we worked with the Institute for Local Governments at CUNY to do an equity indicators report. That gave us a snapshot of the racial disparities in Oakland. We look at 72 indicators of well-being that really told us where we were doing really bad and where we were kind of okay, but we could do better. And that became the baseline that we started to use to work with departments. So when we looked at the downtown plan, the first conversations that we had with planning were about including people who actually lived and worked and played in the downtown. And some of the questions we asked in the toolkit that we use was that, like, who came to those meetings? Who wasn't there? Do you know why? What were the barriers? And so what we found was that we had kind of like a patchy work, like people didn't really know how to do engagement or how to talk to folks that just come to meetings. And because of the work I do, I know that people of color who have a lot of barriers to participate in meetings because they have to keep 2-3 jobs, because they have kids, because they have to commute longer to come to places. Those are barriers to participation. And so a lot of them didn't participate in these meetings, right? And so we started having those conversations. What does it mean then to have meetings that are inclusive? What can you do now with the resources you have, the staffing you have, to do better? And so we started from there. And we repeat that process to make it better and better and better and better. And at first they weren't very happy with what I was saying, but then the community basically rejected the draft of the downtown plan. And they said exactly the same things that I was telling staff. And so they were like, okay, there's more to this than just me saying it, right?
You had to build the trust with departments before they trusted you.
Yeah.
You had this report.
Yeah.
They didn't really want to follow your guidance, even though you had this report, and then they had to fail first before they realized.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I tell them. I don't want them to fail. I actually want them to be successful, and I want them to do better, because I know what they can. And so we started inviting them to come to the academy that we created to train employees so they understand what is equity. And that is something that I want to tell people first, because there are a lot of different definitions of equity. And the way we looked at equity is very specific, and it's actually in our municipal code. And what it says is that equity is fairness and justice. And what that means is that to really implement justice on anything that you're doing, you have to first look at the data, know what is the reality of what you're trying to change, right? Then you need to talk to people, because the data is not all that. You know, it has some challenges too. And so the good thing is that it tells you that reality, but what it doesn't tell you is how people are experiencing that reality. And the people who live those realities and have to deal with those challenges are the experts to us on how to make things better. So then you figure out how to bring them into the conversation and how to listen to what they need, because a lot of times they don't talk like us, right? Mm-hmm. They don't talk policy talk and jargon. So they might say things like, you know, my street, I don't like my street, but why don't you like the street? And we might think, oh, they need some bike lanes and they need some things that we want. But that's really not what they're saying. So we need to learn to listen in a different way and really start gathering the information in a way that you can incorporate it into the plan and into the recommendations that are going to become actions for implementation. And so I think a lot of times my work with staff is to support them in learning how to translate those things into their technical talk, mm-hmm. So then we can make those changes. And so for the downtown plan, a lot of conversation was also about the history of Oakland, right? The fact that the city has made a mark because it's a black city. You know, everywhere you go and you say Oakland, people is Oakland black. And the culture, it's what brings a lot of people to Oakland, right? The music, the food, the vibe, the hip hop, the West Coast, East Coast, all that, right? So I think it's fair that if we are using that as a marketing tool for the city, we also need to give something back, not only extract, but give something back and build on it, right? Yeah. So a lot of talks about a black cultural zone, a lot of about a black district that really centered that history, but also had an eye for the future. So preserving culture, preserving space, but also bringing resources. So it's not only history, it's really part of the live vibe of the city.
That is really amazing, transformative work, working with staff, getting them to internalize the lived experiences and turning them into policy. We're going to be right back with more Town Talk in just a few. Welcome back to Town Talk. My name is Karina Liu. Today our guest is Jacque Larrainzar from the Department of Race Equity. So Jacque, you've been doing wonderful work, working with departments. There was a recent capital improvement projects engagement process where it was quite successful.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how you got to success?
Yeah, that process has been amazing because it really shows what it takes to change a process and a structure in the city. And so again, like when I was saying that I don't do this alone and that we have this change process to manage how we do that, it's really amazing to see that. So I mentioned the academy, how we support staff to go to that so they get the basics of how we do that change process, what is equity, the components of equity, where we're going for, all that. But then we create the spaces for employees to practice this. So it's not just the theory, it's actually how we're gonna make this real. So very outcome oriented, that's the other difference on what we do, that we really wanna see how we change these things. And changing processes and policies, measuring that is kind of difficult, but the beauty of the CIP is that it involves projects, right? And what we did was we looked at who had been engaged in the prior CIP process. And we realized that there were some big gaps. We actually map the engagement. And if I could show you the map, you would see that there were a lot of dots in North Oakland, a little bit of dots in West Oakland, and some dots downtown. From there to the east, nothing. It was a big hole. And so for us, that's what we needed to improve, right? So that told us where we needed to start thinking how to engage people. Then the question became about how are we going to engage these folks? How do we make this relevant to them? Because talking about capital projects that take years to build and design, it's kind of challenging. Like folks really don't think that way, right? So we had a lot of conversations about how to do this, and Transportation and Public Works decided that we needed to try working together. So that's a big shift for the city. Usually departments work alone and they make decisions on their own, but in this model of racial equity, we encourage departments to collaborate and work together, share information and resources, because that pushes against structural racism. That breaks that siloed structure that really maintains racism and isolation. So they came together, we created a citywide work group that had representatives from all the departments at the director level. And we started having this conversation about the values for the CIP. What do we want to see? How do we want to make it better? Who was going to lead what? And we created some subcommittees that was staffed by all these departments. And I volunteered to be in the engagement subcommittee of the CIP as part of that. And we started first creating this foundation of the values we wanted to see. So equity was a centerpiece of that. But we also wanted to improve health, improve the infrastructure of our buildings. We had some community centers that were falling apart, and some areas in the city that didn't even have a community center. So how do we bring those services there all together? And we started that conversation internally. We came up with a list of 12 different values. And then the next step, right? We needed to take that out to the community and see if we were in the right direction or not. So we had a few town halls with people in the areas where we hadn't engaged people, because we knew that the ones that are engaged, they're always going to come. They know how to, right? They know how to reach council members. They know how to call. They were already engaged. So we needed to figure out this other piece over here where we didn't have any. And so we went to Fruitvale, East Oakland, West Oakland, areas where we have a lot of people of color and that didn't participate. And so we showed them the values. We even held 4 meetings in Spanish, all in Spanish, staff it's bilingual. And we asked them, are these the values you want to see us uphold, or is there something different? They actually took some of those out, and we ended up with 9. And so then we, in conversations with the community, we assigned some weight to that. So we put some points in there. And that became our prioritization process. And through that process, that's how we now evaluate projects. And we decide how to put them in the pipeline to get funded and to be implemented. Okay. And so all of that came from the community. And when we looked at the engagement on that first round after, we noticed that that hall that we had was all populated by dots. And still wasn't where we wanted it to be. Mm-hmm. But in the second round of CIP, we've done 3. We repeated. And so again, we looked at where we didn't have engagement. We went there, we invited people to submit projects this time and tell us what were the needs in their neighborhoods. And so we started to hear a lot of things that neighborhoods needed. And because we heard this from people that the city hadn't gone out in a long time, people started telling us about all these other things that had nothing to do with the CIP, but we were there. And so instead of doing what usually governments do, which is, oh, well, you need to go over there, like, that's not what we're here for. We collected all those requests. And it took a lot of staff time. We had over 230 different requests. Some of them weren't even part of what the city does. Some of them were county issues or state things. And but instead of just, not paying attention, we talked amongst ourselves and figured out a process to send those to the departments that could solve them, or let somebody know that the city had relationships with Alameda or at the state.
So in a few years from now, the Oakland landscape can look very different simply because this community engagement process was equity focused, it was grounded in the reality of what people are living through, and you made the concerted effort to really listen. Yep. And that is transformation inside out. And I think the city of Oakland will be better because of what you and your team have done.
The other amazing thing is that you already can see the difference. The fact that, transportation was able to break records, paving streets that hadn't been paved in 20 years, it's because of that process. We just, again, broke records paving streets recently, I think this week, because of that process, and the commitment of the staff in those departments to make it happen. And really listen to people. And that's one thing that I really want to underline, is that we have staff in the city that love Oakland so much, that are so committed to make things better, that work with us with equity to make sure that that happens, and that hopefully in a few years from now, people will walk around Oakland and they would be able to say, oh yeah, that happened because of equity, and my neighborhood is better because of equity.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, talking about equity and working so hard to transform the city of Oakland so that it could be a more inclusive place for our residents. It's amazing work.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
And that is all for our show, Town Talk, today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again next time. I'm Karina Liu, and I'm signing off.